All right, so since I created outlines of the typeface that I chose in order to use them as vector elements to block out my sketch and my vision, I wanted to go backwards a little bit and show you, before you create outlines, how much you can get out of the type tool to customize the type treatment within Illustrator. So for instance, if I took all of these letters and hold down Option and do the left arrow to kind of collapse the space between them in a way that I liked, that's great. I can then just select between these two and widen that a little bit. I can selectively go in and adjust some of these spaces up and start taking them down. Kind of stair-stepping them. So basically, if I didn't have a clean sketch in mind, how can I get close to what I wanted without having to move anchor points? And you can do a lot of that with the type tool. It depends on what you have in mind, and it's good to have inspiration. Now, why is it nice to keep it as the type tool? Well, then you can just, at any time, change your mind and put in a new letter, and it will render it to that size. Before you create outlines, you want to make sure you don't have any typing errors. Right. Let's collapse the space here a little bit with Option. Let's just do it here. Doesn't affect the E and the M so much. Okay, so that's kind of close, but the big difference here is that this is on a horizontal. So what if I wanted this to be on this curve? Well, this is another great thing that you can't do in Photoshop. You can make an arc in Photoshop, but you can't make a path that you put type on. So this is what I can do. I'll make a new layer, just so you can see it. And I'm going to draw with the pen tool. I'll actually use the... Come on. Oh, it's yellow. You can't see it very well. But let's just do a gentle curve. I don't like this yellow. I'm going to make a new layer. Erase this layer. Regular pen tool. Do a gentle curve, just like that. Right? And then I don't want it to be a closed path. I just want it to be a stroke. In fact, I don't even want it to be a stroke. I want this stroke to also be turned off. So this is what's called an empty path. That allows me to adjust the angle of it, the curve of it. So I want it to be subtle and a little bit deeper at the end. I can also rotate the whole thing. I can also enlarge the whole thing. Okay, so now I've got a path. If I go to my type tool and I select all of this, especially the elementals part, and say copy, then I can go to my empty path layer, which is right there. And in the type tool drawer, I can say type on path tool. And then I can paste it on my curve. And just like with the regular type tool, I can set it at different parts of the curve. Now, it's not the same as kind of the elegance of my design, but you see how I can kind of open things up but it's kind of fun to be able to not be on the horizontal all the time. Okay, then if I take my small selection tool and I play with that path, it will play with the text at the same time, because that type is on the path. So if I mess with my curve, it will mess with the type. And that looks pretty good. So then I can take the large selection tool and rotate the whole thing, and it will rotate my type. I'm not going to have perfect control over it. I'm not going to get exactly what I want, which is why it's still going to look very computer generated. But there's a lot you can do without ever having to render them as outlines, at least in the beginning. So let's make this curve more extreme. And this is a bit of a pain doing typesetting in Illustrator, but it keeps them as a vector, keeps everything as clean as it could ever be. Come on, work for me. That's what I wanted. Come on. There we go. Up. Bring this down a little bit. Widen this up. All right, so I think that's about as close as I'm going to get. Now notice it doesn't lean the letters for me. But if I use the type tool, the type on path tool, I can try, if it gives me the option, I can try to make things italicized to lean them, right? There's just different things I can try. Well, that's the thing. I'm trying to show you all the things you can do without having to outline it first. But ultimately, to get it any closer, I would then have to do the next step. And this is what I would always recommend. You leave it here. It's the type on path tool. You copy it. You lock it. You turn it off. You make a new layer. You paste it in place. And then on that, you right-click and you say Create Outlines. And now you have vectors that you can individually modify. And that's what I'm doing up here, by just drawing them myself. And that works, but I think I want to make it myself. So I'm going to continue with that. But I have those different options. Okay, so going back to this, it's going to unlock it. Notice I'm using my locks and my eyes to kind of organize all of these assets. Now, what I could do is take this E and do all those same kind of curves, or to make it a little bit more readable and a little bit cleaner than just my sketching alone, I can select the E I've already modified and I can copy and paste it. Right? It'll still be on the same layer, but a new path. And then I can use the large selection tool and modify it from there. And then take each anchor and put it where it needs to go. And I'll build a little bit of a curve into this, but not much. Certainly not as much as I had before. I want to narrow this gap. A little bit. But it's nice. Now I have this slight curve built into the back, which I think is helpful. And the more you zoom in, the finer selections you can make in terms of placement. This is what designing your own logo type is like. It's just a logo that you're able to read. I'm trying to pay attention not just to the shapes of the letter forms, but also the negative shapes they're making, that those are interesting and engaging. Because at any time, if I turn off my sketch, it should be really readable and pretty interesting. I think I want to narrow its neck a little bit. And this will give me a good approach for the next E that I do. Yeah, that's better. Let's make that curve even more subtle. So you have all the control in the world here. Okay, for the M, it's the only M in the design, so I'm just going to go ahead and bring it down without making a copy. Use the large selection tool to rotate it, to stretch it. And then use the small selection tool to play with the individual anchors. If I need to see it more clearly, what I can do is make it somewhat transparent, just like I would if I was working underneath a layer in Photoshop. And by making it somewhat transparent, then I can move the anchors right into their places without any difficulty. But it's an easy mistake to make in Illustrator to kind of leave things transparent and then actually do something like merge them, where at 100% they're somewhat transparent still, which is a weird technical issue that would be better avoided. So as soon as I can, I'll move this back up to 100%. This gives me very clean letter forms. I'm getting this stair step on the bottom that I like. Very dynamic. Brings the eye along. All right, so let's go back up to 100%. See what that looks like with the sketch turned off. Does that read? Yes, it does. Are the shapes clear, the negative shapes? Yes, they are. Good. So, good time to save it. But instead of a sketch, this is going to be my black vector, not my color one. Save it to the desktop as an AI file as I'm working on it. We'll have all the different